Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our series of podcasts on evolution in India. This is a series of podcasts which is mainly focusing on various developments around the EV manufacturing ecosystem in the Indian context. So, we have with us today a very important topic to discuss, which is about the development of the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles in India in order to enhance EV adoption. So, with that being the theme, we have two very important people from the charging infrastructure ecosystem with us today. We have Nilay Chandra from Ather. Nilay is a senior marketing leader currently leading marketing and charging infrastructure at Ather Energy. And as we all know, Ather is a pioneer in the EV space. Since 2013, it has been developing various kinds of innovative solutions for electric vehicles in India. We have vehicles, we have public charging infrastructure, as well as innovative ownership plans from Ather. And we'll hear more from Nilay. And we also have Akshit Bansal, who is the co-founder of Static. So Static is a startup in the realm of charging infrastructure. It is on its way and making great strides towards developing and I'm very excited to know more about how this entire process of charging infrastructure deployment is panning out in the Indian context from both of you. So, hello and welcome. And we'll start with some curious questions from my end. So, Akshit, what is your favorite EV in the four-wheeler segment currently?
Triveni, I currently drive an MG ZS, so that's my favorite because I'm biased.
All right, all right. And what about Nilay? What is your current favorite EV in the four-wheeler segment?
I think it's all the stuff that comes from Tata. It's probably the stuff that's built in India, and I think they understand Indian requirements better. So all the EV products which come from Tata.
Okay, okay, great. No one has a favorite Tesla yet.
No, I think right now in the Indian market, it's not there. So
All right, all right. Okay, and I have another question since this one is specific to charging infrastructure. So, tell me about the most innovative location where you have found a public EV charging station installed. So, I think I'll start with Akshit again.
yeah, most innovative location. We have put chargers, four-wheeler chargers on highways on the dhabas. So I think that's a very good location for charging stations to so that people could travel intercity, right? So I think that's a very innovative location.
Okay, okay.
I wouldn't say innovative, but I think one of the most recent requirements that has been peaking in leaps and bounds is we want to head to tourist spots, put charging infrastructure in tourist spots, right? So I think that's not innovative, but I think that's really interesting because the two-wheeler consumer wants to take their vehicles electric and go for these longer trips, and they want charging infrastructure in tourist spots. So I think that's interesting, not innovative.
But I think that's a great development actually because range anxiety was one of the main issues with electric vehicle adoption. And if people are taking their electric two-wheelers for long drives, then why not? And to tourist spots, that's a good development. And I think at my end, I have seen these public charging stations like a temporary solution in Kirana stores, and that I found was the most innovative way to put it. While you buy your groceries, you get your vehicle charged. So that's something we found out in Jaipur. Anyway, I think now we'll move on to the more serious questions for today's podcast. And I'll start with the question about the chicken and egg problem. And this one's for Nilay. In the Indian context, we've come across a lot about the chicken and egg problem when it comes to deployment of charging infrastructure. infrastructure. So, what has been your experience in that context, and what is the significance of a robust and standardized public charging network for promoting electric vehicle adoption at a city level? And how exactly can that be achieved?
Oh, that's a very loaded question, but I'll take them one by one. So first of all, is it a chicken and problem? I think in the consumer's mind, it is a chicken and egg problem, right? Because the consumer believes that till there is complete assurance of ubiquity of charging stations, they would not end up considering an electric vehicle. Now, in reality, the behavior of electric vehicle is very different between a bus and let's say a non-personal kind of commute. Personal commute four-wheelers and personal commute two-wheelers, right? So, if you were to really ask me, that is charging infrastructure in public spaces the key bottleneck for two-wheeler adoption today? In reality, in execution, it is not, but in the perception of the consumers, it still is. Uh, where the chicken and problem is very real, and we can talk about in more detail, is that being able to charge at home is probably where the egg is for charging infrastructure in the two-wheeler space. Whereas in the four-wheeler space, I think realistically, because four-wheelers are purchased for longer distance travels and not for your daily commute, I think charging infrastructure settlement is like a real bottleneck for consideration of electric vehicles. So there, I think it's a real chicken and egg problem. But across places, because the international intelligence about charging infrastructure and electric vehicles comes from four-wheelers, comes from countries where intercity travels are the most frequent use of their vehicles. And the perception is very high that till there is a huge amount of infrastructure, we just cannot adopt an electric vehicle. This was significantly high, I think, 3-4 years back. I think now, with a certain set of consumers owning electric vehicles, I think that perception of that criticality sort of coming down. Also, the presence of chargers has increased by leaps and bounds, and we'll talk about it. So with that, I think two-wheelers are sort of entering the space where the consumers are reasonably balanced between their need and between the sense of availability. But is it a journey to go? I think it's still a long journey to go on that perspective. And your final question was like, how critical is it for the overall evolution? I think charging infrastructure is I think charging infrastructure and electric vehicles is sort of analogous to the mobile phone and the connectivity world. And in that way, it's very, very intertwined. And in different ways, we can talk about this example as to how the parallel is. I don't think these worlds can work in isolation. The business case of charging infrastructure is dependent upon adoption of electric vehicles. The penetration of electric vehicles is dependent upon the availability or the access of charging infrastructure. So it's sort of that much intertwined. Though in reality, its actual experience or relationship is like your mobile phone charging and your mobile phone, which is sort of slipped in, and you don't think of your mobile phone charging as a different thing. It has just slipped into your life. I think that's how in reality the two-wheeler charging experience is. And we'll talk about more in this podcast about it.
Right. Thank you so much, Nilay. And I'll take it over to Akshat. So, what is your take on the chicken and egg problem, and how can a robust public charging network be achieved? Since Static is doing that, I would like to know more about it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Nilay mentioned it very well in terms of four-wheelers and two-wheelers. I think it's more of a real problem for four-wheelers because four-wheelers are meant to drive like intercity as well, and people drive it on long distances. So it is a very, very real problem there. Two-wheelers can still be charged at home because of low batteries. And at home, you have the required load to maybe fast charge a two-wheeler as well. But in terms of four-wheelers, you do not have the required load to fast charge a four-wheeler. So it is very, very important to have public charging infrastructure which can charge faster four-wheelers. Now, I think to have a robust infrastructure, it is very, very important that it is accessible to people. So starting from your home to your office, to the shopping malls or on the highways, there should be charging stations. So it is accessible to everyone. Right, in a country like India, where a lot of people do not have access to parking in their homes, they would have to charge at public places. And the second thing is a reliability of the charging station, which is also very, very important. even if there are chargers, we should like they should be reliable, right? Or the experience should be reliable. The charger should not be broken, or the uptime should be there. And the third thing is affordability. Because what we have seen is because we have built chargers, we have built this infrastructure, a lot of the times it is not affordable because maybe the hardware is imported or it's a new technology. So the cost is really high. So to build this like robust infrastructure, it is very important that there is accessibility, affordability, and reliability of this whole charging network and the charging experience. So yeah.
Thank you. I think those are very, very important points that you have put forward. And that's what I think we have to see how it pans out in the Indian context in the coming years. Right. So, Akshat, I have a related question for you. We know that range anxiety is one of the key deterrents for EV adoption. So, how can the recent developments in charging solutions and charging solution technology address the range anxiety issue in the near future? And additionally, we know that battery swapping could be a feasible solution for addressing range anxiety. That is in the talks right now. However, it's in a pretty nascent stage in the Indian context. So, in what ways can charging stations collaborate with battery manufacturers for further updating and upgrading the charging?
Right, I think yeah, in terms of range anxiety, being an EV owner myself, I believe that range anxiety is not that real. To be honest, if you are a two-wheeler driver, especially because you can charge at home, and there are a lot of plug points that you can charge within the city as well. In terms of four-wheelers, it becomes a problem, but the infrastructure is developing. Government is pushing a lot. There are lot of private players like us as well who are building intercity networks. So I think this will decrease over a period of time. And today you need to plan your travel. But what I feel is range anxiety is overrated, to be honest, than it is real, right? The second thing is in terms of partnering with a lot of battery manufacturers and OEMs. We feel that there can be a lot of other ways that vehicles can be charged, not just plugging, like battery swapping and like wireless charging. We are also working with some of the OEMs on battery like wireless charging technology. So it'll take a lot of development and a lot of involvement with all the different stakeholders like OEMs, governments, different corporates, and private companies like us, right? But what I believe is that in terms of battery swapping, I think Nilay would be able to answer it better as to a lot of personal segment two-wheelers have not moved towards battery swapping like Ola, Ather. They've not moved. Tesla is not to battery swapping. And what I believe is that it compromises the performance because the battery is the heaviest part and it has to be at the lowest part of the body to maintain stability and aerodynamics and all of that, right? So it depends. I think Nilay would answer that better as to what technologies they would come up and we would have to adapt accordingly. So we are like ancillary services to the OEMs, right?
Right. Right. So I think I'll give it over to Nilay to answer the question about battery swapping. Nilay, if you could please
No,
tell us more
not
about
one podcast, not one interview without spending 10, 15 minutes on battery swapping. Still the awareness is no, I think it's like I told in the previous point, right? A lot of our thinking about charging infrastructure, electric vehicles, is taken from the international world, right? And we know category after category that you can't just pick something from the international world and put into India. India is India, and there are certain reasons why certain things behave that way. We have a segment of consumers, a certain type of behavior, a certain type of country that we live in, right? And I think like usually when I list these 10, 15 points of why. So let me start by saying battery swapping is an amazing solution for buses. It's an amazing solution for shared three-wheelers, for cargo. Okay, essentially a good criteria to put where battery swapping really works well is where the source and the destination is sort of predetermined is one criteria, where time is money, where you can't have the wait time to sort of charge in the middle of your trip. So I think that's sort of the second case, where standardization is very easy. If you get a fleet of, let's say, cargo vehicles, you can afford to go to a single partner, go for a single specification, have the same battery, and places which are more capex intensive. Overall, your business is capex intensive, so you can invest on swapping way early. So I think these are the holy combinations of spaces where battery swapping works well, right? And there are a lot of companies in India who are working towards battery swapping into these categories. I think in the personal space, battery swapping does not work. And I think internationally as well as nationally, a lot of players have tried it, they have forayed into this, they have sold their business to somebody else, and they've moved to charging, right? And the reason for that is multifold. And I'll start with the fact that the moment, like Akshit was mentioning, the moment you have to make the battery at a level where the consumer can easily take it out, you will, tweak around with the right dynamics. You will take a very heavyweight thing on the top part of your vehicle, which is never recommended in the vehicle dynamics, right? So that's point number one, right? Point number two is it is one of the most expensive things on your vehicle. It's around 40 to 45% of the cost of your vehicle, which means that if it is detachable and can be taken back to your home, then chances are that if you're going to park it in an unmanned place, somebody can pick it up, right? So that's the second perspective, how, battery swapping, just as a theory of leaving something that's 40-50% of the cost of your vehicle unguarded, sort of doesn't work, right? The third point that comes into place is that it's heavy, right? Even for, let's say, for a technology that Ather adopts, our battery is around 20 to 25 kgs, right? Let's take a 20 kg battery, right? And scooters are family use. Would I buy a vehicle expecting my father to pick a 20 kg weight and take it back in the home and charge? I would not do it, right? And imagine like you lugging this on and taking to your home, charging and bringing it back. That's an everyday activity. Think of another product that you purchase where you carry 20 kgs every day to and fro. It doesn't happen, right? So I think that's sort of the third reason why it doesn't work. The moment you make the battery detachable, you actually add to a lot more expenses, because now for getting the degree of safety that you need around the battery, the connection points are sort of loose out, right? Because it can be detached. So you have to invest overtly over there to make your vehicle safe, which means that you're adding further to cost, right? So that's point number 4. Swapping necessarily requires some degree of standardization across the industry. You can't have like these swapping stations having 16 type of batteries by 16 OEs, right? Which means you are asking to standardize one of the things which is the biggest differentiator in the category, which is the battery. The battery is the heart of the vehicle. If you standardize the batteries across all the players, then you'll take away a huge amount of the differentiation, right? So that's point number 5. When you get into a swapping, the overall vehicle's performance, the overall vehicle's safety is highly dependent on the battery. So let's say, if you pick up another new battery and there is something that goes wrong in the vehicle, it's very difficult to find accountability of whether it happened for the battery and hence the battery swapping company should be responsible, or it happened because of the vehicle and the vehicle company should be responsible. Have I reached 10 points?
Right.
I don't know. But I could go on like this. The point I'm trying to make is that while on paper it looks like a perfect solution, it really doesn't work for the Indian context. And there are better solutions which can solve the same problem that we're trying to solve without getting to the swapping way. And I think most of the OEs have worked on that path and have like sort of understood. We luckily sort of understood this really early. So we from day one started investing on faster and faster and faster charging. And that's where we think, the final destination lies for personally owned vehicles. Yeah.
Okay, so since you mentioned the point about standardization, I think I'm going to direct my next question at you. And I would like to know that the government and private players are actually making conscious efforts towards developing charging infrastructure across the country. And as you mentioned, standardization is a very important aspect for it, as well as for India's plans of localizing the entire charging infrastructure manufacturing ecosystem. So, what are your views on standardization, and what is Ather doing towards that end?
So a whole bunch of things. We are talking about standardization now of the charging infrastructure, right? And I think towards that, government has been holding a committee for the last 3 years where they are working with the OEs, with the charge point operators and different bodies of government to come out with standards which can get used for four-wheelers and two-wheelers of India, right? And like while a lot of things were in the works, I think this year has been a good year in the way that actually some of those standards have come through, right? So there is an LEV standard which has come through for the normal speed charging, and there is a DC standard which is underway in that committee for discussion. when we started, there was no standard out there, and even in the two-wheeler space globally, there is no standard which works right for two-wheelers, right? There was an AC001, etc., and it was sort of put onto two-wheelers because again, it came from the international thinking of what could work, but it actually did not work for what was right for the vehicle. Now the standards that we are trying to think are actually thought grounds up for what will be right for two-wheeler vehicles. And like the charging standard that we have, which is a combo standard, is one of those which we believe is very well suited for the two-wheeler industry in general, right? And that is the reason while we built this and we have a lot of patents around it. In the middle of this year, we actually opened up our charger and said that it's no longer going to be proprietary to us. And any OE can come and build based on this charging connector. Any charge point operator can build products on the base of this so that there is aggregated demand and there is some sort of standardization at the connector level. We are also working with the same ETD 51 committee to see if this can be adopted as the combo standard for the country. So once that happens, it sort of makes it very easy for every player to start adopting it. And there is already an infrastructure out there. We already have like 200 plus locations. We are almost heading to 500 locations. So you readily have like a charging infrastructure ready the day you start adopting this. And tomorrow, all other players are going to build infrastructure of this nature, and there is going to be aggregation. So I think on the AC charging, there is already great moves that are happening towards standardization. Not only us, I think every player is now talking about putting those in the private premises so that not only their vehicles but others can charge. Similarly, in the public side, we need a standard to come. Ather has taken the first move by opening up the standard. We are working with the government, and we hope that the government will move on this really fast, and we will have a fast charging public network which can be used across vehicles. And the day that happens, I think this category will start adoption really fast, because charge point operators will find it way more easier to invest on a particular standard because they know now there is aggregated demand across all two-wheelers. And two-wheelers are 85% of vehicles which sell in India. We are huge, right? So though initially all charge point operators started with four-wheelers because connector standard was sort of established, CCS2 was where most of the OEs were building their products on. But I think in India, the magic is going to happen when the two-wheelers get standardized, because that's where a volume of business lies, that's where a volume of opportunity lies, and also ubiquity lies. Like you can afford to put, like we aim to put out, I think we're already around 35, 40 charging stations just in Bangalore, right? And imagine 3-4 players starting to put such systems together. You will start seeing it almost everywhere. And once that happens, I think this whole anxiety in the consumer's mind is going to go, right? So, which is why having a standard, putting enough of them in public so that people can see it, and putting them in across all private locations, whether it's offices or whether it's home, so the consumer can actually use it on a regular basis, is where the opening of this category penetration lies.
Right. I think that was brilliantly put, Nilay. Thank you so much. And I think our listeners would be really glad to get these points in such a simple, put forward in such a simple format. All right. So I'm going to do a counter question to Akshit on Ather's move to open up the proprietorship of charging connectors. So Akshit, what do you think of this particular move by Ather, and how do you think that's going to pan out for other OEMs and also for charge point operators, and how would that help in achieving standardization? Along with that, what impact do you think it is going to have on the future of R&D in the charging infrastructure space?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very welcome move because especially in terms of two-wheelers, there was no standardization earlier. So it was very difficult, especially for a charge point operator, to invest on a charging station, right? Because you were not sure if you would get the investment back or not, who would charge there. So I think it's a very, very welcome move. And given that the impact it will have is that if more and more players come and invest on charging stations, which are the Ather standard, I think a lot more two-wheeler OEMs would also adopt the same connector and same technology. And I think it'll be a circle where, and it'll be like a network effect with more OEMs getting into the same technology and more more CPUs would build chargers of the same technology. So I think it'll have a huge impact, and I think it's a good move and a welcome move. So yeah. But in terms of four-wheelers, I would just add that there's pretty much standardization already. So I think there's no problem in terms of four-wheelers.
What about research and development? How is that going to be impacted if proprietorship is opened up, or if standardization is?
If sorry, I missed that point.
So, how will this opening up of proprietorship affect research and development in the charging infrastructure space? Because, as I understand, any kind of disruptive technology brings in a lot of opportunity for R&D. This is also the case for electric vehicles. So, how is that going to be?
I think it will be accelerated because if someone has already built something, right? You can just learn from them and maybe improve on them and maybe take the technology and build something over it, right? So it'll just accelerate the whole R&D process for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just
Killer,
add
what
to
is?
that. I think I'm sorry, you asked me something.
I was actually asking you about your take on that.
No, I think like standardization is not anti R&D, right? In fact, it is to synergize R&D developments towards faster towards a particular direction. So whether it's wireless that Akshat spoke about, whether it's faster and faster charging, whether it's R&D not just on the hardware side but also on the communication protocols of what features can you give to consumers for a charging infrastructure, whether it's lowering the cost of the existing hardware. I think all of these forms of R&D are only augmented when there is a standard, because there are different intelligent minds which are applied in a similar direction rather than trying to fight each other on different directions. So I don't think standardization should be seen as in any manner an inhibitor for research. In fact, like I would say that like most innovations in the past have been carried through by scientists, right? If you go back to most of the discoveries and inventions, it's not a single person or a single generation which has done it. It's almost been generations or different kind of people who continuously built on it. And I think standardization is that direction, right? And the good thing about two-wheelers is that India rules the world when it comes to two-wheelers. So when we are able to innovate, when we are able to put standards, we can almost drive it across the globe, right? And one of the aspirations is for India to become the manufacturing hub of electric vehicles and electric vehicle equipment, and that plays huge, right? We do not need to just wait for imported vehicles to own electric vehicles. We can do it in India, and I think standardization goes ahead by aggregating that demand not only in India but globally for that kind of innovation to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a last round of questions for the serious discussion, but this is based on the business model aspect of both Aether and Static. So I think I'll go with Akshat first. And Akshat, tell me about the various business models that can be developed for charge point operators. It will ensure that there's additional revenue or some additional scope for business development.
Yeah, I think charge point operate. It is a very simple business. You set up charging stations and you earn by selling energy whenever someone charges on your network, just like a petrol pump would. So that's a very simple transaction, and there is nothing more to it. Just that you can have additional revenue sources by, for example, advertising on the chargers, maybe because it can be set up at a prime location. So I think it's a very simple thing. Apart from that, what I would say, other than a charge point operator, is if you go deeper into the technology, there are a lot more opportunities when you build the chargers or when you build the software. So it can work in both ways in terms of you can sell the hardware to a lot of OEMs, to a lot of real estate companies, and in terms of the software, you can build an aggregated network where you aggregate a lot of other charge points, a lot of other charge point operators, and you become a customer facing interface, right? And you can bring in a lot more advertisement revenue on your software from that, as well as addition to it. So I think those can be other ways as well.
Right. Thank you. I think that is one of the additional benefits of setting up a public charging network in India,
Okay.
right? All right. And Nilay, I would like to know what are the challenges and benefits of integrating charging solutions along with the main operations of an OEM, and what has this journey been like for Ather? This is in the context of traditional OEMs not really being, having to think about setting up a petrol pump or additional infrastructure for the sale of their cars or their two-wheelers. So what is it like for in the electric vehicle space?
So I think there is no wrong or right in this one. Like when we started, unfortunately for us, there weren't so many charge point operators, or there weren't so many players who were take up this mantle. So there was nobody to set up the petrol pumps, as you say, right? So I think and without the petrol pumps, it won't run. So for us, it was really not to say that, oh, this is the only thing that we want to do, but it was really that it was to be done for the industry to trigger. And there was a lot of skepticism, a lot of pessimism around this. This model won't work. Forget the monetary aspect of it. That you can't put it in these locations. It can't be built around safety. No location will agree to it. So I think somebody needed to take that journey and say that, look, this can be done, and this is how it can be done. At the point that we started, everybody was talking about, yeah, it's going to be there in government locations. We said, no, it's going to be there in malls. It's going to be there in uh, cafes, right? And we were in that way very deviant from the view at that point of time. Today, it almost seems all merged because everybody's saying the same thing. You go to any OE's charging infrastructure communication, and it will sound like what we said 5 years back, right? And I think that's a good place to be in, because we sort of took a direction, and now everybody sees merit in that direction. So I think that way, that's how the layer of it started. But it is possible to have like the relationship that many OEs have, where this infrastructure is completely separate for them. And there is also a lot of synergy when you can integrate it, because see the experience of the consumer at these locations, the kind of speed that you can get with these chargers, all of them are very, very tightly integrated, right? And when you can integrate all of that, the consumer's app, how their need is, what kind of range they have, what their typical trip is, to what chargers they like, what is the typical type of frequency of charging that they like, which are the places that they visit the most. When you are able to integrate all of them, then you are able to give a notch higher experience to the consumer for the same charging, right? And I think there the opportunity is high. So the way we look at our charging infrastructure business is that we play both of them, right? We play for the Ather consumers. We try and enable a layer better experience because we can afford to do it while integration. While for the other players, we provide what is a standardized experience around charging, which can be scaled up across multiple OEs. And I don't think there is anything to say that it only has to be in a single path. I think both of them sort of has its merit, and our journey also says that, like, at a point when you want to start and when you have to invest at scale, it really helps to know that there is a captive base of consumers who you can, in future someday monetize on this investment. And so it allows you sort of a head start to get into investing into this, right? You are closest to the consumer, understanding everything, and in that context, understanding the charging infrastructure, right? So your understanding of the consumer's charging infrastructure needs are also way better than what you would if you were just providing this like a petrol pump service, right? Also, like which locations to put it, which locations not to put it. Chances are, if a consumer is buying a electric two-wheeler today, they have walked into an Ather store. Whether they buy Ather or whether they go and buy another product is a different thing, right? But that layer of understanding of what is the pulse of the consumer gets way better when you have such a deep integration with the OE part of the world. Obviously, the flip side to it is the OE part of the business is huge, right? So it's always like the big thing to chase for, and we are like a startup in that space. So it's fun that way. The challenges are very different. The nature of business of being an OE and being an infrastructure provider is very different. Sometimes we do feel that if we were more independent, then maybe a lot more other OEs would have been open to collaborating faster. So it just slows the pace down because you're talking to another OE by that way. So we have to just cross the bridge, and once they interact with us a few times, I think that ice breaking happens. But those are the sort of issues of having it integrated together. But I think the synergies of doing that far outweigh. So we work it on a two-pronged method. For Ather, we go deeper in our experiences, more integration. whereas we keep the layers separated enough for any OE to come and sort of get on board and leverage from this method. And it's been very interesting so far. So,
Quite an interesting journey, right? And thank you for sharing excerpts from it for us. So with that, we come to an end of our main discussion, and we're going to follow this with a short rapid fire round for both of you. So the idea is to just take a minute to answer and be brief about a couple of maybe 2-3 questions per head, which I'm going to ask. Okay, so I'm going to start with Nilay. The first question for you is like the opening up of the proprietorship of the charging infrastructure, what are your plans for opening up the proprietorship for battery infrastructure or batteries?
I think like we are an energy company, we are not an automobile company. So in future, if there was opportunities of integrating with like-minded partners, I don't think we would be strongly averse to it. But I go back to what I told you during the battery swapping discussion, that battery is a heart. So having OEs to integrate on battery is a little more difficult than getting OEs to integrate on charging infrastructure, but open to it in future.
Okay, great, thank you. Akshit, the next one is for you. So what would be the maybe 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages if you could list of standardization and interoperability for your business operations?
Yeah, I think 2 advantages would be, one is that it'll become a lot more easier to decide and invest on a charging station, and the returns would be higher. In terms of disadvantage, to be honest, I do not see any disadvantage for a CPO in terms of the standardization of the connectors. So yeah.
All right, thank you. This one for both of you. You can each take a minute to answer this. Who would be making up the teams of charging solution providers and charging station operators in the future? What kind of skills should they ideally have? So this is on the workforce part.
So I think they should have good business development skills, because you have to pitch the concept of this to a person who doesn't understand this completely. You need a temperament of infrastructure, hence uptime, hence like the technical aspects of it sort of cannot be ignored. So that's a second bit to it. And because it's a comparatively newer segment, I think your understanding of the consumer's need for infrastructure and being able to innovate from there, that's something that we very important. So 3 things I put.
Thank you. What about charge point operators, Nilay? That was the second part.
Okay, for charge point operators.
Charging station operators, my bad. Charging station operators.
You mean for charging station operators, when you mean people who host these charging points?
Yeah, who would probably be there. Yeah.
So
would
see, in India, charging stations are unmanned, and they are going to be continued to be unmanned because of the commercials that would be involved for it. Obviously, these are in places where there is there is a security guard in an apartment or in a cafe, etc. So beyond that, I don't think charging is going to be an assisted experience in India anytime soon. So if that's your question.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was asking. Okay, Akshit, over to you.
Yeah, I think if I'm not very clear on the question, but like if it's about building the technology, I think there will be a lot of demand for electrical and software engineering, and a lot of IoT skills would come into play as well, because it is about hardware and software integration, and the experience is good when there's seamless IoT integration between the hardware and the software. So I think that is very important going further. Then in terms of engineering side, I think a lot of energy background, batteries would be helpful. A lot of power engineering would be helpful in terms of faster chargers, DC chargers where rectifiers are there. So power engineering would also be in demand. Other than that, I think for a CPU, it is a very operation heavy business. So a lot of operation skills are also required there. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. the next question for you, what are the critical components of chargers which you think cannot be indigenized in the near future?
For me,
Yeah,
okay.
for you.
Yeah, I think all the parts of the chargers could be indigenized. I just think that as of today, like for example, in DC chargers, rectifiers are a huge problem. Quality rectifiers in India. Then the charging guns are not made in India, especially for like the CCS DC chargers. So, but all of them can be indigenized in India, given that we have the capacity and there are a lot of similar products already being built in India, like the inverters are there. Uh, right, so they have very similar rectifiers. So I think yeah, going forward, everything that we make in terms of hardware and software could be indigenized.
Right. Thanks. Nilay, over to you. What are the upcoming EV charging technologies that we should be on the lookout for?
I think we'll see faster and faster charging. It's not a charger spec, but also the battery technology that's changing that would allow for faster and faster charging. So I think that's one of the things that we will continue with, that will continue to surprise us. So that's definitely one. The other one, like Akshat mentioned, is wireless. It's just like, as a technology, I think it's possible. It's just about its commercial viability at scale. So I think we'll see in pockets, wireless charging coming up, and there may be four-wheelers will sort of go ahead of two-wheelers. So that's the second bit that I do see coming. But otherwise, charging is not like rocket science. I mean, it's just about it's a battery out there, and you just have to charge it. And you just have to provide electricity to it. Right? So, like Akshat was mentioning, it's like an inverter. It's not something where you will find those dramatic changes. I think a lot of things will happen on how technology enables usage of the second life of the batteries into different purposes. So there you will find, how the first life charging is treated, which enables for the second life to be more utilizable, hence reduces the cost of first life, hence makes the product more mass. I think those are the kind of spaces where a lot of innovation is coming our way. But in the very near future, what you should expect is faster and faster charging, is a lot of things on the software stack to, for consumer interaction with the charger sort of to be easy. And those are things that I would expect.
Thank you. Akshay, do you have a take on it?
No, I think Nilay put it really well.
Great. Okay. The last question. What would be the ideal location for setting up a charging station in terms of access as well as revenue?
Okay, I think how we go about it is, first of all, we generate heat maps based on demand. So we aggregate demand because we are working with a lot of OEMs, logistic players. So we understand where the demand is, and we also have a lot of EV owners on the platform. So we generate heat maps, and we know which are the prime locations for EV chargers, which are the hotspots. And there, in those locations, we figure it out on places which will be convenient and accessible for people to charge. So either locations where people can spend some time to shop or to eat, and usually where it is visible as well and easily accessible. So that's how we choose a charging location.
Right. Thank you so much. Nilay, would you like to add something to that?
Home, office,
location?
home is the first place where you should set up a charging infrastructure. Office is the second place you should set up a charging infrastructure. Followed by what is called the third place, places where you hit before you have to do that unplanned evening catch up with your friend. So I think these are three places that you should always plan, because once you take care of your home, which is where your vehicle spends 8 to 10 hours, I think most of your needs are done. Then you cover office, where again your vehicle is idle for 7 to 8 hours. You sort of taken care of. The only thing that you missed is when you suddenly meet a friend in the evening and you guys decide to go for a longer trip. And those are the third kind of places that we should fill with charging stations. That's it.
Thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode. And I think we have got some very good points from both of our speakers. Would you like to take a moment to put out some last message, each one of you, for our listeners? Nilay, if you could go first.
My message is clear. If you heard us and if you see our optimism on the charging infrastructure and electric vehicles, the best thing that you as individuals can do is go back to the place that you stay in, go back to the offices that you work in, and ask for a charging station. Okay. This one single thing done by multiple individuals, whether or not you own an electric vehicle today or you intend to own it tomorrow, can dramatically change how fast your environment can get greener, can get more electric vehicle friendly. And all the OEs and all the charge point operators are anyways doing everything that they can to set up the public infrastructure. I think your homes and your offices are where a knock from the door from inside is required. And that's what would be my message out to everybody.
Thank you. Akshit, what about you? One last message.
Yeah, I know on similar page, I think it is very, very important right now to care for our environment, and EVs are one of the way where we like electrify our whole transport. Yeah, it'll save a lot of the trouble to all of humanity in the future. And given that India is home to some of the most air polluted cities in the world, it is very, very important. So given that we are a charging company, I would request, I would have the same message as Nilit as to it does not matter if you have a charging station, if you have an electric vehicle or not, but it is very important that you have a charging station in your premise, in your residential complex or your office. So just ask out for it, because you would be one of the reasons to solve the chicken and egg problem that we all talk about, right? So yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.